In our world, marketing is less about persuasion and more about perspective. And just for context, this email went out to 5,600 people today. I've been helping brands in our higher level program come up with marketing concepts this past week. And it's become clear that when we try to persuade in our marketing, our focus goes to the wrong place. It goes to tactics, it goes to tricks, it goes to hacks, ways to manipulate and convince our consumer into doing what we want them to do, which is usually to buy. But when we switch our attention from persuading to shifting perspective in our consumer, persuasion ends up happening as a natural consequence. Here's an example with Brian Johnson and his blueprint, snake oil, which is his extra virgin olive oil. Brian Johnson launched his extra virgin olive oil last year in 2024 and has done millions in sales from it, given his large social audience of 4.3 million followers across all platforms. And we got to keep in mind that olive oil is a commodity. This is not the first olive oil to ever hit the market. It's not a very novel product. There's aisles full of them at every grocery store around the world. But what makes his marketing so effective and being able to sell is not aggressive persuasion, but rather shifting the perspective of his consumer. And just for context, this is Brian Johnson. He's the one who's taken blood from his son and is, according to him, the world's most measured human. And the movement that he's building is Don't Die. When combing through his PDP for his olive oil, you can spot out the perspective shifting that's everywhere in his content that ends up leading to the PDP. Some example of that include olive oil that meets longevity criteria, third-party testing, polyphenol content, UV protection for olive oil. In unpacking this, the perspective shift for the consumer is twofold. The first one is if they weren't really hyped up about olive oil before, now they are, because it's no longer just an oil you cook with or flavor your food with. It's something that helps you with living longer. The second shift is if they were previously big on olive oil, they now have a new lens on evaluating for what a good one looks like. The criteria of polyphenol content, UV protected bottle, third-party testing, et cetera. What's notable with the marketing is that there's no overt persuasion going on, pressuring people into buying now or making embellished infomercial-like claims. In our world, the best marketing is more about shifts, like what Brian's doing here, and less about sales. It's more about perspective and less about persuasion. Brian's best customers aren't the ones who need to see that his olive oil is 50% off on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. They're the ones who are sold not necessarily just on the product, but the perspective that they bought into around polyphenol content needing to be high, UV protection for the bottle so it doesn't get rancid and spoiled. And for me, and in our world, the best way to shift perspective tactically is to start with the person you're crafting your marketing for. If you know what their current perspectives are, you have a vantage point to use as contrast to make a shift in their perspective. Knowing intimately the personas you're crafting messaging for is the shortcut to making these shifts. And my favorite way to go about doing this is to use an AI tool that we built called the Persona Profiler that you can get trial access to, along with all of our other AI tools, blueprints, SOPs, frameworks, in the first link in the description below. All we need to do is click this button that says, let's clarify personas. Then it guides you and says, absolutely, please share the product description or copy you'd like me to analyze. And you can do this in the form of copy and pasting stuff from your product page or landing page, or you can upload a PDF of your PDP or LP. As an example, I used Brian's PDP to see what it would spit out. And what it did was gave us 3 different personas. First one is the precision optimizer. Second one is the wellness achiever. And the third one is the rooted reformer. And for each of these personas, it gives you the emotional drivers and pain points, the top 3 core motivators, the perspective they have of themselves, and also the perspective of the product category before deciding to make a purchase. And on the other side of that, strategic perspectives to offset where they're currently standing at when it comes to their perspective. As an example, if there's been a lot of chatter in the marketplace around how olive oil or fats tend to go rancid or oxidized, losing their potency during transit, the feature that Brian has fits that really nicely, which is that it's third-party tested and bottled in a UV protectant glass to prevent degradation so that it arrives biologically active, which is something that the precision optimizer would care about. And as a meta comment, when it comes to working with AI, the role that we play as humans using the machine, I really see it as being the tastemakers, in that we're able to generate so much output from AI that our job now becomes choosing what is useful and what is not. When I use a tool like this, I do not expect that every single piece of output is something that I plan to use. However, I'm looking for the 10% of stuff that I wouldn't be able to think about on my own or ideate on my own. And it does a really good job of putting into words things that I can approximate getting at, but can't quite find the vocabulary for. The next one I've done it for is Create's creatine monohydrate gummies. All I needed to do was upload a PDF of the product page, and it's come out with some stuff that is decent. There was one here that I liked, and that was this one over here for the persona of the Fit Life Maximalist. And the perspective was creatine is for dudes who lift heavy and chug chalky drinks. And this is a good example of what I just talked about, where I didn't really like the outputs that came from here. However, I did like this perspective, and it steers our decision-making in the direction of how can we position ourselves for a perspective shift for people that creatine is beneficial beyond just the utilization for gym bros. As an example, did a quick search with, or a query with ChatGPT asking about the benefits beyond just that for gym bros. And it gives us some nice material: improved memory and mental clarity, mental fatigue resistance, neuroprotection. In a world where I'd say maybe years ago, where creatine was mostly just marketed for people who are working out, if you were the first to start talking about these benefits and mentioning that your product was formulated to support with these aspects of your health, I have quite high conviction that it would be quite effective. And moving on to another example, with this tool, you can even use it for very generic products that don't already have on their PDPs or landing pages really great marketing. As an example, here is a screenshot of a melatonin gummy taken from Amazon, which typically doesn't have as compelling of copy compared to D2C, Shopify, or direct response landing page marketing. And it was able to give a lot of ideas for us to consider when it comes to personas and their perspectives that we can use and understand their current vantage points to then create shifts in perspectives with. Here's an example of a vantage point that's worth taking into consideration. Sleep supplements are hit or miss, often leave me groggy. If your product was actually formulated with a mechanism inside of it that addresses this issue, then you have a great entry point for shifting the consumer's perspective, that it's no longer a binary perspective that you held, that all supplements cause grogginess. As an example for this brand, one of their mechanisms may be that because of its fast-acting release, it helps you with falling asleep without lingering in your system, interfering with REM or morning cortisol peaks, which can be quite powerful. Because for someone, as an example, who has maybe tried melatonin in the past and found that it did make them groggy, they might see this and say, oh, It's because every single melatonin that I tried in the past did not have this fast acting release mechanism. And because you were the one to help me see the shift in perspective, kind of like pointing out that the sunglasses that I thought was missing from my house is actually on my forehead, I'm now more likely to see you in the light that you know something that I don't, and I may want to try out what it is that you have. When you shift perspective in this way, persuasion and influence happen as a consequence, as opposed to something that you try to force and tactic your way into happening. And now that you know our philosophy on this, you should watch this next video to see how we use AI to quickly come up with image ads so you can shift perspective at scale.